The 27th session of the Senate in the first regular session of the 17th Congress is hereby called to order. Let us all pause for a minute of silent prayer. Amen. Secretary, please call the roll.
Roll call of members. The Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano, De Lima, Drilon, Ejercito, Escudero, Gatchalian, Gordon, Honasan, Hontiveros, Lacson, Ligarda, Pacquiao, Pangilinan, Po, Recto, Soto, Trillanes, Villanueva, Villar, Zubiri, Senate President Pimentel.
With 17 senators present, the chair declares the presence of a quorum. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, it is ready. I move that we dispense with the reading of the journal of the 26th session, Tuesday, September 27, and consider the same as approved.
Is there any objection? There being none, the motion is approved.
Mr. President, may we, before we proceed with the reference of business, we'd like to acknowledge some very important guests in the hall. Well, let me start with the New Generation International School grade 11 students headed by Dr. Emmanuel Ramos, and Luis Aguado National High School headed by Ms. Ellen Lopez and Ms. Chona Reyes. Guests of Senator Legarda, Mayor Josh Edward Lubangbang, Councilor Tanyi from Cabugao, Ilocos Sur, and the Technological University of the Philippines, Manila, Bachelor of Science in Computer Science students headed by Mr. Nino Melchor. And then also, Mr. President, guests of Senator Gordon, Mr. Nicholas Luye, head of the Strengthening Movement Coordination and Cooperation International Committee of the Red Cross, Mr. Nelson Castaño, the Disaster Management Head, Asia Pacific International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent, Pascal Portier, head of Delegation International Committee of the Red Cross, Kari Isoma, head of Delegation International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies in the Philippines. Of course, you know what it means when we say Red Cross. It means Dick Gordon, Mr. President. For acknowledges, also we'd like to acknowledge the guests of Senator Recno, Polytechnic of the University of the Philippines, Santo Tomas Branch Alumni Association Incorporated of Santo Tomas, Batangas, and guests of Manny Pacquiao, Senator Pacquiao, Professor Jofar Pantao, Al Jedidia Panuncilio, Kenneth Garcia, Philippine representatives to the International Linguistic Conference in Indonesia. I would like to welcome them to the Senate, Mr. President.
Welcome to all of our guests. Welcome to the Red Cross officials.
Thank you, Mr. President. May we proceed with the reference of business?
Is there an objection? There being none, the motion is approved.
Bill on first reading. 1172, an act strengthening the right of citizens to information held by the government, institutionalizing open data governance and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Risa Hontiveros.
Referred to the Committees on Public Information and Mass Media, Civil Service, Government Organization and Professional Regulation, and Finance.
Resolutions. 171, directing the appropriate Senate committees to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the status of the implementation of Republic Act No. 9344 as amended, otherwise known as the Juvenile Justice Welfare Act of 2006, with the end in view of further strengthening current legislation, providing interventions and protection of children in conflict with the law, and ensure that legislative measures are in place against proposals to lower the minimum age of criminal responsibility from 15 to 9 years old. Senator Laila De Lima.
To the Committees on Justice and Human Rights and Women, Children, Family Relations, and Gender Equality.
172, resolution commending and congratulating the Philippine National Women's Basketball Team, Perlas Filipinas, for clinching the gold medal in the 2016 SIBA Women's Championship in Malacca City in Malaysia. Senator Sani Angara.
To the Committee on Rules.
173, resolution directing the Committee on Education, Arts, and Culture to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the proper education and development of responsible social media use in schools. Senator Paulo Benigno Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committee on Education, Arts, and Culture.
Resolution number 4, concurrent resolution granting consent to Senator Franklin M. Drilon to accept the Grand Cordon of Order of the Rising Sun to be conferred upon him by the government of Japan, introduced by Senator Soto III.
To the Committee on Rules. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, as allowed by the rules, with the consent of the Chamber, I move for the consideration of Senate Concurrent Resolution Number 4.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, Senate Concurrent Resolution Number 4 is in order.
Thank you. Mr. President, may we ask the Secretary to read the title of the measure without prejudice to inserting into the records the entire text of the resolution?
Secretary, please do so.
Concurrent resolution granting consent to Senator Franklin M. Drilon to accept the Grand Cordon of Order of the Rising Sun to be conferred upon him by the government of Japan.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, may I be recognized to sponsor the measure?
Senator Soto is recognized to sponsor the measure.
Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, it is with great honor for me to sponsor this concurrent resolution, which seeks to grant consent to our dear colleague, former Senate President, and now Senate President Pro Temp Franklin M. Drilon, to accept the Grand Cordon of the Order of the Rising Sun, one of the highest awards conferred upon foreign nationals in the name of the Emperor of Japan. It shall be conferred upon him by the government of Japan in recognition of his relentless efforts to strengthen the Filipino-Japanese relationship, which helps the country in obtaining development assistance from Japan and helping ease visa restrictions on our nationals, among others. It is not true that he is being given this award because he fought in World War II. Article 9B, Section 8 of the Constitution provides that no elective or appointed public officer or employee shall accept without the consent of the Congress any present, emolument, office, or title of any kind from any foreign government. So in view thereof, I move to adopt the concurrent resolution consenting Senator Franklin M. Drilon to accept the Grand Cordon of the Order of the Rising Sun to be conferred upon him by the government of Japan and publicly wear the corresponding insignia of the decoration. I so move, Mr. President.
There is a motion to adopt Senate Concurrent Resolution Number 4. Is there any objection? Hearing none, the motion is hereby adopted.
Thank you, Mr. President.
What's the pleasure of Senator Drilon?
Let me just, Mr. President, thank you very much. Let me just spread into the record my heartfelt thanks and appreciation to our colleagues for adopting this resolution, giving consent to my receiving the Grand Cordon of the Order of Rising Sun. to be conferred by the government of Japan. This will be conferred upon your humble representation by the Emperor. Yeah, we wish to adjourn the other session.
Can we pay attention to our
I was just
esteemed colleague, please?
yes. The order will be conferred and will be honored by an audience with the Emperor of Japan on November 8th of this year, and we would not be around during the opening of the session, but indeed this is an award which we are deeply honored to accept in behalf of the Senate. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Drilon, and congratulations, sir. Majority Leader?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd also like to acknowledge Mayor Alfredo Matugas Coro Jr. of the municipality of Del Carmen, Siargao Island, Surigao del Norte.
Welcome to the Senate.
Mr. President, from Cordon, we go to Gordon. I move that we recognize Senator Richard Gordon to speak on a matter of public interest.
Senator Gordon is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would first of all like to congratulate and ask for order and quiet so that we can properly honor the Daibutsu of the Philippine Senate. And I say that in jest, but in reality, it is out of just to get the attention of the body towards this very important award for Senate President Drilon, and I congratulate him as a friend, as a legislator, and certainly that has this has brought honor to our country. Mr.
Thank
President,
you very much, Senator Gordon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Mr. President, I rise today on a question of national public interest. Mr. President, in Central Luzon, including Manila, if you will, we have 3 international airports. You have the Manila International Airport, or the Ninoy Aquino International Airport. You have Diosdado Macapagal International Airport, and then you have the Subic International Airport, Mr. President. Having said that, I dare to say that we have let grass grow under our feet. Tumubo po ang damo sa ilalim ng tinatapakan natin sapagkat on that historic day, on 16 September 1991, the Senate of this country rejected the basis agreement. That created a time clock that would tick and make sure that we are able to proposition our alternatives dito sa mga iiwanan ng Amerikano. Having said that, Mr. President, there was a national responsibility and duty on the part of this country to see to it that we do not get considerable embarrassment, especially with what happened with the debacle in Clarkfield at the height of Pinatubo. It was pillage and rob by departing American soldiers, so they say, and some of our countrymen. Fearful of that, Mr. President, the people of Olongapo who are from all over the country, because Olongapo is a hodgepodge community coming from the north, the south, and even in Mindanao, Mr. President, the volunteers of Subic made immediate preparations. We started out with 8,000, ended up with about 28,000 people who cut grass in homes that do not belong to them, guarded the airport, ran the power system for a while, and at the same time made sure that we maintain our dignity as a country. A lot of expectations were on our shoulders. After all, the Americans were very upset at their losing their premier base. It was an $8 billion facility. You will recall, Mr. President, that occurred in September 1991 on the 16th day. In about 2 days, Mr. President, we will have the 24th anniversary of the turnover of the first half of Subic Bay, which will culminate on the 24th of November on the whole turnover of the American facility
to the Philippines. The former Senate President and current chair right now is aware of that event because yours truly was appointed by the President of the Philippines to handle the transition of the facilities as mayor of Olongapo. Thank you very much for your kind comments. I still look young. And I will not, yeah, and that was many pounds ago. So statements emanating from NB can be reserved later on. Having said that, Mr. President, you can see the picture with Ambassador Solomon on the first half of the turnover. And let me just say, we were so fearful at that time that it was going to be another missed opportunity. After all, this country lost many opportunities in the past. We had a railroad built in 1896 that stretched all the way from Manila all the way to the Mortis in the north, and a railroad from Manila all the way to Bicol. Mr. President, after all, after the war, we were second only to Japan in terms of economic might. After all, Mr. President, at that time, the Philippines had the highest literacy rate in Asia. After all, Mr. President, we had an air force that we sent even to the Congo under the auspices of the United Nations, our Sabre jets, in the early 50s. But alas, in spite of our protestations that when the Navy leaves, or the U.S. Navy leaves, our Air Force will become all air and no force. I can remember people were looking at me and saying I was pro-American. But I was really thinking of the many Filipinos who were not faceless, who had families, who were going to lose their income, their ability to send their children to school. They had to make, preparations so that their children will eat 3 square meals a day. And all of a sudden, after Pinatubo, a year after, there was nothing but bleakness in the future. Well, to a certain extent, fearful of that experience, for example, of Sangley Point, which was turned over in 1971, there were promises of a pre-port, of a seaport, and an airport in Sangley Point, which did not materialize. It became a Philippine base. When we took over the reins of Subic in September of 1996, therefore, of 1991, therefore, 1992, I'm sorry, we were very perturbed. But with the firm vision and the commitment of many thousands of volunteers, we were able to protect and preserve the facility to prosper. One of the facilities in that base, which constituted $8 billion worth of American infrastructure that was left behind, was the QB Airport. That was then called Admiral Radford's Folly. It was a folly on the part of the Americans because they said they were going to move more earth than they move in the Panama Canal. Giniba nila yung bundok para magawa ng airfield. That made the base even more robust in terms of strategic interest of both the United States, perhaps more so for the United States than the Philippines. But when the turnover occurred, Mr. President, we started out like a house on fire. We had Coastal Petroleum come in right away. They took over all the tanks that became a strategic, reserve for the Philippines. That gave us, I think, 26 days of supply of oil, so that in case there was an embargo, we could still survive for 26 days, an additional 26 days. We took over the power plant and we gave it to what was then a robust company called Enron. And right away, in less than a year, we had a power plant that was built in Subic Bay, creating jobs. The people who volunteered were absorbed by these companies, and rightly so. Soon, there were other companies that came in. The Taiwanese came in. Conferee from the Georgetown Leadership Seminar, at that time as Secretary of Economic Affairs of Taiwan, the name of Vincent Hsu. Later on, he would become Deputy Prime Minister of Taiwan. He right away committed to this representation 300 hectares. Later on, that 300 hectares would become the site for the biggest Acer company outside Taiwan. Later on, Hitachi would be there, and many other companies would come in there. But then we were also, after developing the port, that's another story, another speech, but I will concentrate on the airport. At that time, Mr. President, it was crucial for us to move tourism in. And we did bring in the tourists, domestic tourism at first. Eventually, we were tested in the airport. Sometime in about 1991 or 1992 or 93, suddenly, a plane crashed on the tarmac of the Manila International Airport, or the Ninoy Aquino International Airport. And at that time, I had a guest named Governor Chris Patton. And we were in the Officers Club overlooking, nakikita namin yung airport runway. And sabi niya, Dick, can your airport bring in 747? Sabi ko, Governor, it is like Kaitak. And in fact, I was surprised. In fact, right now, there is a 747 plane landing. Wow, I said, this is my lucky day. And then all of a sudden, a few minutes later, another 747 landed. All told, that day, about 14 flights of 747s and DC-10s landed in Subic, because the whole slew of airplanes coming in from abroad were diverted to Subic. I can tell you, we were not prepared. We had no airport terminal. It was a very small one. But again, the Filipino volunteer through authority came over there. We picked up suitcases. We borrowed buses from Victory Liner, and we brought them to the various barracks that were abandoned by the Americans that were manned then by volunteers. All told, we avoided a debacle that could have really embarrassed us. And in fact, we said we were just volunteers, and many of them understood. Having said that, that gave us the impetus to try and get a big fish on the line. I tried DHL, they were not listening. I tried UPS, they were not listening. And then I remembered a fellow by the name of Fred Smith, who owns FedEx at that time, said, I was told that he was a shore patrolman that served in Subic as a U.S. Marine officer. And so we launched our fishing line, and we brought in FedEx. We got Mr. Fred Smith to come down. He's a legend in business schools all throughout the United States of America. And he saw the potential of the airport right away. And at that time, I did a little dog and pony show. I drove for him. I was riding my car, and he was in the front seat, and I was showing him the sights. And he said, can that runway handle FedEx? And I said, why don't you get off the car, and see that guy over there? He used to work for the U.S. Navy, and talk to him. His name is Felix Vizay. And Mr. Felix Vizay is still alive, and he talked, and when he came back, Dick, where do I sign the dotted line? And I said, we are ready, anytime you're ready. And indeed, I went right back to the World Bank, borrowed the money, and we started, reconverging or refitting the runway that was built for fighter jets that was now going to tackle heavy laden aircraft. And indeed, we did. In 29 weeks, the airport was finished, including a brand new airport terminal that was made ready for APEC. We were getting lucky. We were on a roll. President Ramos had announced that APEC was going to be here, so he said, can you handle it, Dick? And I said, we can. The volunteers will. And a former jet plane hangar was transformed into a spanking, really nice, shiny international airport terminal that was good for 700 passengers at any time. Mr. President, at that time also we started bringing in chartered flights from Taiwan, from Malaysia, and from Hong Kong, some of whom you can see in the presentation. Grand Air, Dragon Air, Air Asia, which was then owned by the father of Sherwin, our senator here, and we brought them in at various times. We were running 26 flights a week at that time. I was very careful lest I mentioned Congressman Villanueva, who is supposed to be the TESDA king. Yesterday I mentioned him as William Gatchalian. And he was protesting that he has now become the plastics king, not the Tesla king. And I was very careful that I would not refer to him as Tesla Quid, Tesla man. And I just promoted you. Anyway, to make a long story short, Mr. President, we immediately were able to haul in the Philippine Airlines inaugural flight from the United States of America. President Ramos landed there, and immediately Subic was in business. A few months later, we would bring in our first FedEx plane. Can you imagine? We had 18 flights a night, Mr. President, of 747s and DC-10s. Something that amazed the whole world, and I was very, very proud of the volunteers at the time. And so, Mr. President, years went on. It was how to do this the next Hong Kong. We were being covered by the economists and everywhere, and I was very proud of our country. Certainly, sometimes I'd speak with tears in my eyes because of the sacrifices that resulted in the success that made it all possible. Transformation of Subic was underway. Finally, we had done something right. Unfortunately, after sudden twist of events, suddenly FedEx left. I was no longer chairman, and out of respect, I went there to bid them goodbye. Mr. President, at that time, when we got FedEx, let me just say that we put in an ASR-9 radar. It did not have a radar. It was the first-class radar. We had an ILS, Mr. President, that was brought in. We had an ALS. Some of that equipment can be seen on the slide projection if my people can just follow through. This was the equipment that was placed there. All told, we spent $31 million from the World Bank and another $12 million for a total of $43 million. And it's there right there. And we were able to pay off that liability after several years, Mr. President. The airport was making money. Unfortunately, we lost it. And this is why I'm standing here today. We not lost only the airport or FedEx. Nobody bothered anymore to promote Subic as an airport. The charter flights stopped for some reason. You know, FedEx uses as Asia One hub. It was the #1 hub of FedEx abroad, outside of the continental United States. We were picking cargo from all over the world. They were bringing it there to distribute to Asia and bringing cargo all over the world as well, coming from the different areas in Asia. It was the logistics hub. It was happening. When they left, Mr. President, like I said, no more aircraft landed in Subic, and today, the only aircraft that was landing there are flights of Indian pilots training in Cessna flights. What a shame, Mr. President. Now, that is not the whole story. Never mind the $8 billion left by the Americans. Never mind the almost $45 billion saved. Never mind the sacrifices of the many people who worked Subic Bay or the volunteers from universities all over the world at master's degree and volunteered in Subic. But, Mr. President, NLEX was built for Mariveles and has been enhanced ever since. Later on, they would have the Olongapogapan Highway. Later on, we would have Tiplex. So there was a slew of infrastructure programs being introduced in the billions of pesos, Mr. President. Now, tanong ko po sa inyo, nakinabang po ba ang Pilipino dyan? Oo nga, nakakapunta sa Maynila mas mabilis, kaya siguro kargado tayo sa traffic ngayon. Kaliwat kanan ang traffic natin. Nakadagdag ba sa hanap buhay sa Central Luzon? Wala po. The combination of infrastructure and the two airports of Clark and Subic, close by Manila, that's 3 airports and a slew of highways that would have created an economic boom that would have really made magic for the Philippines at the time. Worse, Mr. President, nawala yung ASR radar, costing almost $6 million. Nawala yung ILS, kinalibanay. Binigay iba sa Maynila. Wala ngayong lumalanding sa Subic. Merong investor doon na sumulat sa akin at ang sabi, you ask us to come here and we cannot use the airport. We want to fix planes here. But they cannot land. They are told they cannot land, Mr. President. In fact, when I landed there the first time, I was coming by helicopter, it was nighttime, and an American was operating the communications lines because they had no tower communications. And I said, ba't ganon? Wala na ho tayo. Sabi ng piloto, wala na hong communications dito. Wala na tayong mga gamit dyan sa Subic Bay. What a shame! To quote somebody, nakakahiya. Here we go again. Now, we can add Subic in the highway of missed opportunities that this country has become famous for. And Clark, hey, wait a minute. Clark had 2 runways. Don't forget Clark. They probably had more billions invested by the Americans. Ano nangyari? Ginawa ang Diosdado Macapagal International Airport. Okay lang yun. Pero pag nagkaroon ng problema sa Clark, sa Maynila, dadalhin yung airport, yung mga aeroplano doon. My God, Mr. President, friends of mine from Qatar wrote me that they were there for 9 hours inside the aircraft. 9 hours! Oh my gosh, as if we did that, we needed that like a hole in the head, Mr. President. Reputational damage big time. Not to mention the fact that even a former Undersecretary of Tourism, Oscar Palabiab, because it was rainy in Manila, they were diverted to Manila International, to Clark International Airport. They could not even be diverted to Subic anymore. Naipit rin sila. Many periodicals, I didn't have time. I just realized it was almost the 25th year. That's why I stood up today. And as you notice, I'm not reading my speech here because it's coming from the heart and my mind. From hard-earned experience, Mr. President, my father never taught me sayang. Kasi, kung that's not in our vocabulary. I was schooled in that by my parents. We did something about Subic. The people did something about Subic. Pero ano nangyari? Why? Why kayod? Why kaon? Sabi ng Bisaya. Pero ano nangyari dito? Wala talaga. Walang bagong development. At ano nangyayari? Swertehan na lang. Mabuti na, Ayala ngayon, nagtatayo doon sa yung Antapora. At bakit magtatayo? Na-realize nila, may airport palang malapit dito. Maganda pala yung highway dito. Sabi, kaya pala natin labanan ng Hong Kong. Kaya natin labanan ng Singapore. Kaitak is no longer Kaitak. They call it by a different name now. Chaplakot. Chaplakot yun? I forgot the name. But they're building another airport in Hong Kong. Singapore continues to rebuild its airport. Singapore, kasi laki lang na Subic, has the #1 airport in the world. It's one of the best airlines in the world. Singapore Airlines. A small city-state. If we all decided to relieve ourselves, and I told them that, when they hang Contemplacion, sabi ko, yabang-yabang yung mga Singaporeans, kung sabay-sabay kaming iihi, malulunod kayong lahat, diyan kanyang kaliit yung bayan na yan. And it was quoted. And they even pilloried me for that. Well, that's a fact, Mr. President. Nakakahiya talaga tayo. And so having said that, Mr. President, we are once again at crossroads. We let the grass grow underneath our feet. Worse, may kasabihan sa Latin, if I remember my Latin correctly, ovam lupo committere. You let the wolf come into the sheep. The sheep farm. Parang pinapasok mo yung sawa para linggisin yung mga manok sa manukan. And that has been happening, Mr. President. Talagang nakakahiya. Hindi ko masabing sayang, ay bawal eh. Nakakahiya because we are supposed to live by the potential that God has given us. We're supposed to be made into God's image and we have the free will to do what is right. But apparently we're guilty of complacency. Walang pakialam. Okay lang. Talagang ganyan. Wala tayong magagawa. That's in our vocabulary. But to do something about it is far from our mindset, Mr. President. Talagang dapat magising na tayo at sampalin tayong magdamag, baka sakaling makaramdam tayo ng konti. We laugh about it, we raise our eyebrows, but what are we going to do about it? I would like to investigate, not to go after people because of malfeasance, misfeasance, and non-feasance. Magkamali ho ata yung mga kasama natin sa Senado, binigay sa akin yung blue ribbon. But I accepted it without lobbying, but far be it from my mind to say I am not going to investigate and hold people responsible for it. Not because I want to, but because I want to be responsible, like all of us here, to make sure na mga kababayan natin ay magkaroon ng choice. What is poverty, Mr. President? When Pinatubo happened, may mga ita sa bundok. Sabi sa akin, pwede ko hubang ibaba itong mga bamboo slats. Sabi ko, wag na, babayaran ko na lang. Ito lang ka, babayaran ko na lang. Hindi tayo kakasa sa 3 truck na dala ko sa taas ng Pinatubo. I defined poverty at that time as an absence of choice. We are leaders and we're supposed to create choices for our people. We give choices to them when we give them better education. We give choices to them when the Department of Trade and all our attaches all over the world and all our public officials, including all of us here, when we go out, we try to get investments para magkaroon ng trabaho ang mga kababayan natin. That is choice, Mr. President. And yet today, walang choice. Walang choice mag-endo. Walang choice. Kaya, Mr. President, I would like to say here today that 24 years ago, we closed the chapter on Subic, the first half. November 24, in a few months from now, we'll be celebrating the 24th anniversary of the completion of the turnover. Next year, we'll be celebrating the Silver Jubilee, 25th anniversary. Are we going to see, again, a speech by this representation to say, nothing happened? We have all the infrastructure there. May inggit lahat. Karsada. There are several senators here from Central Luzon. Senator Villanueva. Senator Angara from Aurora. Senator Bamakino. Senator Pangilinan. And yours truly, Mr. President. Surely we can do something about making Central Luzon and Northern Luzon a bright spot and a bright future for our people in our country. Surely we can do better than investigating all the extrajudicial killings. Surely we should have time for this little things called employment generation, of investment generation, of opportunity building. Surely, Mr. President, we're capable of being active participants, like the lowly volunteer who made the future his friend, Felix Visay. I use this as an example. He lost his job, he stayed in the airport, and he convinced Fred Smith to commit to put Subic there. Well, we lost that opportunity. I can talk about another lost opportunity, but not now is not the time. But, Mr. President, I call upon the members of this chamber to make sure that never again that we must be watchful. We must open our eyes. We must be analytical, not just for the scandalous, because the profane, because the scandalous things are more interesting to those who sell media, who pander towards suffering, because they sell newspapers, radio, and TV, and that is not a slight upon the media. That is the nature of the beast. But surely, we can try and pan the camera into something where people do something right for a change. That is why in Subic we put up, nakalimutan na ng lahat, bago ako umalis, I put up a marble monument for all the 28,000 volunteers. There you go. So that today when somebody dies, they go there and put a flower, because there were those, sabi nga sa Castilla, at kukunti lang Castilla, alam ko, no todos dormían en la noche de nuestros abuelos. There were those who kept vigil in the night of our forefathers. And they did. We owe them, Mr. President. They're not faceless. They're not nameless. And we owe our progeny. We owe our people a future. Let us all make the future our friend. Join me as we open this can of worms and not come out with just negativisms, but find a way to put it in the budget. And I appeal to my good friend, Lauren Legarda, to try and find a way to bring in the budget so that they can build it. My goodness, Mr. President, they even gave, because of Senator Drilon's proposal, that all these government corporations should provide dividends to the country. Well, they did, 185 million in dividends. The SBMA budget is 1.5 billion, Mr. President. Ano ang kapalit doon sa trabaho? Yung ba lamang ay para maitaas ang sweldo ng mga tao natin? Ako po, on record, ang kailangan po natin, hindi lang growth. Ngunit jobs. Hindi lang jobs. We want well-paying jobs. Hindi ando. Hindi yung o na lang itapon. Kakagatin. Para ba yung kasabihan natin sa Tagalog, isang kahig, isang tuka. Tumutuka ng tumutuka. Yung manok, hindi tinitignan ng parating na kinabukasan. Kaya isang araw, hihilahin na lang siya sa kanyang leg and his neck will be cut off para magkaroon ng pagkain ng ibang mga tao. We cannot do that all the time, Mr. President. So today, Mr. President, I appeal to the Chair and to the Senate. I know all of you, I have no doubt about that, are well-meaning, you're patriots, you love our country, and you will put country before self. I pray, and I want to believe that, and I believe that. I have no reason to doubt. And therefore, Mr. President, I make this appeal before you today, otherwise, we will again have another missed opportunity that adds to a country of nasadlak sa dusa. So I close. You've heard me say this before. I've said this many times. I quote Waldo Emerson when he said, "Not gold, but only men can make nations great and strong. Men who for truth and honor's sake stand fast and suffer long. Brave men who work while others sleep. Men who dare while others shy. They build a nation's pillars deep and lift them to the skies." Thank you very much for your patience, and God bless the Republic of the Philippines.
Mr. President,
Thank you very much, Senator Gordon. Yes,
before I
Senator
move
Soto.
to recognize Senator Zubiri for interpellation, I would just like to associate myself with the intent and content of the privileged speech of the gentleman. There is one Filipino trait that not too many people know about. We never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. May I now move that we recognize Senator Zubiri, Mr. President?
Yes, Mr.
Senator
President.
Subiri is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, with the honorable, distinguished gentleman from Zambales, yield to a few friendly questions, Mr. President.
The gentleman from Zambales may yield the floor if he wishes to do so.
Willingly, Your Honor. Thank you very much for my good friend and fellow Red Cross. By the way, as the Red Cross delegates are here, I just want to know, you all to know that we have four officials of the Red Cross here. Senator Migs is the Vice Chairman of the Philippine Red Cross. Senator Gatchalian is a board member of the Red Cross. And they all do us proud. And of course, Senator Cynthia Villar is a stalwart pillar of the Las Piñas Red Cross chapter. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. President. Mr. President, I completely agree with the views of the distinguished gentleman from Zambales that Subic is one of the crown jewels of our infrastructure development program for Central Luzon. As a matter of fact, in the previous Senate, the previous 14th Congress, where I had the distinct honor of being with him, we were pushing for the Subic Clark
321.
3-1, Subic Clark Naiya corridor to develop that particular area. But as you can see, Mr. President, history has shown that Subic grew because of visionary leadership. Leadership by example, leadership of passion and of vision. A man who had plans. A man who had not only plans but laid out these plans, Mr. President, without lifting his chair. He's here now in this August chambers, one of the members of the Senate. I want to ask him, because as you can see in the speech when he had left Subic, it was on a downhill trend from there. How important is leadership to the post of these particular GOCCs? Because it's obvious, Mr. President, if you put somebody there, they say if you get peanuts, you buy peanuts, you get monkeys, they say. So, Mr. President, I would just like to ask the good gentleman how important leadership is for these GOCCs for it to be able to develop.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to answer the gentleman from Bukidnon. Vision is important because it's better to know where you're going and not know how than to know how you're going and not know where. Mr. President, the problem with our country and the solution must be is that we stop appointing people who just want the title. It is just like us. The Senate President right now on the podium, on the chair, and our current Senate President are both lawyers and I'm a lawyer. There are several of us here. I used to say we have 49,000 lawyers, probably more today. Everybody wants to be called attorney, but we have no justice. Same thing. People want to be chairman of Subic because it is nice. Chairman, sikat, meron kang hawak na tao. Pagkakataon. At kung gagamitin niya yung ganun, eh talaga walang mangyayari. Kung walang vision, walang driving force. Kung walang integrity, hindi ka susundin. Tatanda ako, sinabi ko, pag nakita niyo ako nagnakaw ng isang pako dito, nakawin niya na ang buong Subic. Wala pong nagnakaw ng mga panahon na yan. May nag-attempt pumutol ng kahoy, tao mismo ang nagsusumbong pagka pinuputol po yung kahoy. So people have to own the vision. People have to have or share the vision. As I used to say, shared vision, shared values, shared sacrifices, shared triumphs. And that is what we really have to try and get our people to get up and go.
With the permission of Senator Zubiri, I'd like to know from the gentleman from Olongapo, who now chairs the SBOA?
Mr. President, it's a gentleman by the name of Bob Garcia. And by the way,
his term has expired.
That's
Is there
right.
a new one?
there are many pretenders. And di pa ako lumalabas yung appointment, sinasabi ng chairman na, wala pa akong appointment. In fact, there was a brouhaha, it was reported to me, apparently, nagdala doon ng tao, and I don't want to say this because this is hearsay, sabi siya raw appointed, dinanapan siya ng appointment, wala pa palang appointment.
I read in the media a certain Efren Dino.
I think it's Martin Dino, Mr. President.
I'm sorry, Martin.
Yes, Mr.
Dino.
President. I don't think he has been appointed, otherwise he would have gone in. But nagkaroon ako ng konting hindi pagkakaintindihan doon.
Martin Dino.
Idiin ninyo, Mr. President.
Yeah, you know him, Mr. Gordon? Senator Gordon, do you know this Dino?
I know him as a member of the Crusade Against Crime and Corruption. I have no questions about that. When you put somebody there, I suppose the President would know better than to put somebody who cannot promote, who cannot go out and go to the whole capitals of the world, the economic capitals of the world, the business capitals of the world, to be able to say, come over, pasok ko kayo dito. There's the rule of law there. Magagawa ho natin lahat yan, and we will not be harassed. We will not be corrupted. We will not allow ourselves to be corrupted. I don't know. I wish we could examine his credentials. But I would advise the President, and I'm not saying this, in fact, I was being asked, recommend. Sabi ko, kung ang kukuha tayo dyan, sabi ko, kumuha kayo ng tigarian o nag-volunteer. Pero kung kukunin nyo, you're taking a risk because baka mamaya mangyari na naman yung nangyari and lalo tayo madidiin sa karimlan.
Mr. President.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President.
But far be it from my intention to try and influence the President on this matter, Mr. President.
But precisely, Mr. President, Senator Gordon, as you mentioned earlier, the leadership qualities that is needed to be able to manage such huge crown jewels, and I'm not saying anything bad on the potential current or potential chairpersons of the SBMA, those names floating, I have nothing against them. As a matter of fact, the gentleman that was mentioned by Senator Gordon, Mr. Martin Dino, is also a good friend of ours. He's a nice man. We know him as a nice man. And not to put down anyone, not to bring down anyone or cast aspersion on anyone. I personally, Mr. President, would like to see a professional running Subic. Subic is sort of like, and the good gentleman could correct me, Subic is an eco zone. It's one of the three or four eco zones, free ports in our country. It could be marketed as Macau, Singapore,
Hong Kong.
or Hong Kong. And what we need there is a combination of a manager, at the same time a tourism expert who can actually market this all over the world, as well as a marketing expert being able to gather businessmen to relocate their companies to the said facility. Would that be correct, Mr. President?
That's correct, Mr. President, and I'd like to join you. He is not an enemy, he is a friend, but I think that we have to examine whoever is going to be there to make sure that he has the qualities that you mentioned. Mr. President, an airfield does not an airport make. An active airport means you have a good airport manager. He must be able to attract the flights. You probably have to start again with charter flights para masanay. He has to fix up Subic to make sure it's attractive for tourists. He has to fix up the investment climate to make sure there's no corruption. He has to make sure that the master plan is followed. Because if you do not do that, Mr. President, nobody's going to go in there. Kala natin just because we have an airport and a seaport, swak na. Clark is also the same way, Mr. President. The speech today was meant for Subic and Clark, learning from the lessons of Flying Point and other missed opportunities. And therefore, it is important that at least as senators, we can really influence and try to support these magnets for investment, properly run, so that we could provide investment opportunities for everyone.
Yes, Mr. President, I could clearly recall when I was a younger gentleman in the mid-90s, when Senator Gordon was still SBMA chair and head. All of us wanted to go to Subic. Subic was the hottest spot to be in Luzon as a tourist destination, as a shopping destination. I remember they used to have a lot of, what do you call those, when you go shopping, the outlets, duty-free outlets, and even food. When you wanted to eat a great cheeseburger, fast food, American fast food, we'd go to Subic. Bowling, I remember they had a fantastic bowling facility. Subic Bay Yacht Club was still brand new. It was really the in place to visit at that time, Mr. President, bustling with so much activity. And it saddens me because I was there recently to buy a truck at the auction, because they have an auction now. I think that's the only thing that really is going on for Subic in the newspapers, is the quarterly auction of trucks and buses and vehicles. And I was so sad to see, Mr. President, the ghost of its past, of what it used to be in the past. It's really sad, and I never talk about it with my good chairman of the Red Cross and my good chair Ninong, because I know it makes him sad to hear these kinds of comments. And I'm hoping that with this new administration, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, that we want to achieve inclusive growth. The way to achieve inclusive growth is to be able to make more centers of progress outside of Metro Manila. We are toiling in and out of this traffic 4 or 5 hours a day. Obviously, the carrying capacity of Metro Manila is too heavy already for the city, or the carrying capacity of the city is too much already for its population. And therefore, we have to look outside of Metro Manila, Mr. President. And in the 90s, that was the way to go. I knew many friends who bought houses there who said, I'm going to live here and put up business here. Now, when I talked to them, they said, well, you know, ninakawan na yung bahay namin, pinasukan na. Yung wala nang masyado kami nakikitang plans and vision and development. So they moved back to Metro Manila. Would the gentleman agree with me on that point, that really what is needed is visionary leadership, a man who can market Subic, a man who can put this all together, run it like a tight ship, and make sure that there's no smuggling? Because, Mr. President, one thing that is also very lucrative in these free ports is the issue of smuggling. Because if you are corrupt, and I'm just saying, if you are corrupt and you have a corrupt mind, you get into Subic, that's where you get all sorts of shenanigans that could happen. Smuggling of sugar, smuggling of rice, smuggling of meat products that could come out of the gates of the free port. That has been an issue many times over when the good gentleman was no longer in SBMA. I remember there were several investigations on that effect. Would the gentleman agree with me?
That is correct, Mr. President. Just as an added anecdote, you claimed, you said that you played in the bowling lanes. There's a story to that, Mr. President, and I'd like to share that with you. When the Americans left, they were very bitter. They took out the bowling lanes. Tinanggal po yung bowling lanes. I went up to Washington. I was dealing with the World Bank at that time. Pumunta ako sa State Department, nakiusap ako. Alam niyo, sabi sa akin ng Amerikano, kala niyo, porque Amerikano ang tatay ko na mestizo, or pangalawa ko Amerikano, maka-Amerikano ako. I'll share this story with you. And, you know, I said, can you leave the bowling lanes? Ang sabi niya, you know, Mr. Mayor pa ako nun eh. Sabi ko na, kung nung araw nandiyan ang Amerikano, abay, 4 na abogado kagad sa State Department, 4 sa Defense Department ang pupunta dyan para tulungan kaya. Talagang nagingiting aso eh. At ang sabi niya, you're no longer the top 10 of the hit parade, you used to be top 6. Ang basa ninyo, ngayon wala na. So, Mr. President, sabi ko sa kanya, well, sabi ko gano'n, wala pala tayong mangyayari dito, alis na ako. Sandali lang, sabi niya, you may want to meet some people like Steve Solarch, kaibigan mo yan. Sabi ko, wala na. Hindi ko na po kailangan yan. At, di ba sabi niyo, wala na kami sa top 10 of the hit parade. Huwag ka naman magalit, sabi na, in English of course. Hindi, sabi ko, tatayo na ako, you'll hear from me. Sabi ko, paalis na ako sa pinto, sabi ko, meron nga pala ako kung kailangan makausap. Sino yun? Sabi ko, si Mr. Brunswick. Sino yung Brunswick? Wala kami senador o congressman na ganyan or governor. Hindi mo kilala si Brunswick? Amerikano ka, kako. Yan ang nag-invento ng bowling lanes doon. Sabi niya, and that, Mr. Mayor, will be the last hit. No, you'll hear from me. And I will prove to you. And that, we did make the most beautiful bowling lane in the country at that time. Umiilaw yung bowling lane. May kumuhang private sector investment dyan. Speaking about smuggling, Mr. President, nako, talagang pagka pinapasok mo, kaya sinabi ko, I'm glad you bit on the bait. Parang pinapasok mo yung sawa sa poultry. If you allow somebody who has no integrity, talagang lilinggisin lahat ng mga manok dyan. And that is why we have to be very careful. We have to tarry a little. Now, Mr. President, can you imagine, if you go back to the slide, natatandaan ni Migs Zubiri, ni Senator Zubiri yung 321. Subic, Clark, Manila, at 2 seaport, 3 airport yon. Subic and Manila. Dinagdagan ko na po yan ngayon. 4 na seaport, sa Fargo, Subic, Mariveles, Seaport of Manila, and the Batangas Seaport. Because kamakailan lang, you heard Manny Pangilinan is going to come up with a shortcut from the NLEX to the SLEX.
Connector
Tuloy-tuloy
road.
sa Batangas.
The connector.
So, lahat siya pag pinagsama nyo, madaling mag-akit ng hanap buhay. We can get business to come here. And that's why yung Calabarzon, nakita nyo, ang bilis because may lupa. Pag may lupa, madali. Ganito ang lupa dyan. Sa atin sa Bulacan. Ito ang square meters. Kaya nga, pati nga ho yung Iglesia ni Cristo, tuwan-tuwa ako, nung nagtayo sila ng Bukawi Arena, Philippine Sports Arena. At kako yan ang umpisa. At mantakin nyo, Mr. President, right away, Ayala came into Bulacan. Ayala went into Porac. They bought 4,000 hectares. Yan ang umpisa. Kaya kailangan, suklihan natin ng mahusay na infrastruktura at pagmamaneho nitong lugar na ito. Hindi dahil kami tiga Central Luzon or tiga Northern Luzon. Lalo na, meron po akong file bukas na gawin na yung railroad na mas madali. Imbis na Manila to Pampanga, wala ho tayong right-of-way problems doon sa Subic to Clark. Pag natapos yun, nasimulan, mas maikli, mas madali magawa, baka sumunod na ibang railroad doon from Manila to Clark. And because of that, lalakas ang hanap buhay. That is why it is so important. Kita naman, hindi ako nagyayabang dito, hindi ako nagbasa sapagkat nasa puso ko po yung sinasabi ko at saka sa isip ko eh. Hindi ko po kailangan na isipin pa yan eh. Pero I am doing this because let us not miss this golden opportunity once again. And you can do this in Cebu. You can have 2 airports in Cebu. Siksikan na yung traffic doon. Mr. President, in Negros Island, kailangan natin mga taong ganyan eh. Si Mayor Pijong, Kabangkalan, Mayor Saiko, he is doing his own. Can you imagine that? Gentlemen and ladies, gumagawa siya ng sarili niyang runway. He got land, he's doing the runway, and I have it in my mind really, I'm sure Senator Drilon will support him, pag napakita na yung plano, you could have another airport that will service Negros Oriental and of course Negros Occidental. And look at the plan of the Senate President. Di sa pinalalaki ko pinatataba ko ang puso ng Senate President, yung Iloilo Airport, lumakas ang Iloilo. Nasundan nung ginawa niya na mga highway na 10 lanes. Nasundan ng mga magandang ilog, ng magandang convention center. That is the way. You complement your infrastructure with investments. And that way, it will pave the way for jobs, for opportunity. And not just jobs, well-paying jobs at sustainable, Mr. President. Kung walang airport, aalis yan. Kung walang seaport, aalis yan. Kaya makita ninyo, naku po, ayaw ko, hindi ko pa bubuklatin po yung tourism. Bumabaksak po tayo sa tourism ngayon dahil sa mga reputational damage na naganap dito noong mga nakaraan. Huwag na ho tayo manisi. Let us fix the problem. Let us not fix the blame. Take that in that spirit, please. Because we're not here. Ano pa mangyayari? Ginawa na eh. Ayusin na lang po natin. Katulad ng ginagawa ng mga nasabi ko mga tao, sila Pidio, sila Frank Drilon, marami po yan, yung mga nangangarap na magawa lahat, yung mga pangarap na makakapagpalakas ng ating bayan. Thank you.
Yes, I agree with the good gentleman on the observation of the development in Iloilo. That is why the good Senate President Pro Temp was awarded the Grand Cordon of the Order of the Rising Sun. Sa galing niya
I
po.
wanted to be sure I heard it right, baka Yakuza eh, pero hindi naman Yakuza eh. Ano ka? Pero okay. We should be happy that our colleague and has worked hard is respected by other countries.
Yes. Well, that's it, Mr. President. Majority Floor Leader, I thank the good gentleman for bringing this issue up. I just really hope and pray that the new administration can really choose wisely when it comes to the management and operation of the Subic, SBMA, as well as Clark. Because these are, as I always say this to everyone who asks me, these are the crown jewels of Central Luzon, or the development of Central Luzon, and the decongestion of Metro Manila.
Pahabol lang po, Mr. President.
Mismanaged, Mr. President, God save us, and I think it would be such a wasted opportunity.
You remember, Mr. President, that we had Mariveles Free Trade Zone. Matagal na matay yan. dinibate natin mahaba dito. Ang tagal nag-interpolate ni President Aquino. Dito, natandaan ko, andyan ako, nandito si President Aquino, Senator Aquino. Ang dami nag-interpolate, lahat, halos. Senator Rile, ayaw niya ng una. Nung magawa na po yan ngayon, aba, ang dami ng mga nagtatrabaho doon. May coach bag doon, ginagawa, about 6,000 employees. Naglalabas na sila ng mga bahay doon sa labas. Tuwan-tuwa yung mga tigabataan. Kaya kung may manghusay na magmamaneho, marami tayong makakalap na hanap buhay. It's important, Mr. President.
Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. President, to ask.
Mr. President, may we recognize Senator Joel Villanueva for the continuing interpellation.
Senator Villanueva is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Majority Floor Leader. Thank you, Mr. President. And before I ask questions, I'd like to personally congratulate our dear Senate President Pro Tempore for that distinguished award. And for this matter, I'd like to ask if the distinguished gentleman from Olongapo, my fellow kababayan from Central Luzon, would yield to very few questions, Mr. President.
Of course, Mr. President, from the rising star of Bulacan, they test the man.
I have to share, Mr. President, this story as I was looking at the pictures a while ago. In the early 90s, when this representation was a student then of the University of Santo Tomas. And I personally wrote a letter to the then chairperson of the Subic Bay Metropolitan Authority, considering that he's making a name not only in our region in Central Luzon, but in the four corners of this nation. And I would like to, again, put on record, even during that time when I was a student of the Economic Society, we have no intention of inviting anyone but then SBMA Chairman Richard Gordon. And thank God he was available during that time. He made life miserable to the officers of ECOSOC because he decided to go to UST through a chopper, and so we need to get permission from the office of City Hall in Manila. And I will never forget that time when he talked about the opportunities that we are enjoying as a country, as a nation, especially as part of Central Luzon. Subic is such a great testimony of what we have accomplished during that time through the leadership of Chairman Gordon. And I was listening to him a while ago. I have a lot of personal stories. In fact, my wife and I would go to Subic to eat and dine, watch movies. When Senator Migs Zubiri talk about the Cosmic Bowling Center, ang dami ko pong experiences doon. Napakadami pong experiences ng representasyon na ito doon sa Subic Bay. Pag napunta ka ng Subic Bay at ikaw ay galing ng Bulacan, parang in ka. Ang dami ko pong experiences doon at tuwan-tuwa po ako sa Subic Bay at kaya tuwan-tuwa din ako na makasama ngayon ang ating Senator Richard Gordon na architect ng tagumpay ng Subic Bay. Mr. President, ang unang tanong ko, what really happened after that? I wanted to ask this question. Kanina, si Senator Zubiri was saying, it's probably a big chunk of it would refer to leadership problems. Question of leadership. Was it about the Asian financial crisis? Was it about the Pinatubo eruption? Ano ho ba talaga yung nangyari, Mr. President? Dahil, again, I also subscribe to what the good book is saying that people perish for lack of vision. And when you talk about visionary leaders, napakaganda nung nangyari noon, especially nung time ni Chairman Dick Gordon. Ano po ang nangyari at nasaan na nga ho ba tayo sa ngayon?
Siguro po, Hindi, alam niyo naman parang tourism rin yan naglagay tayo ng Wow Philippines, walang bayad ang gobyerno. Kami lang po ang gumawa nun Pwedeng gamitin yung Wow Subic, Watch Our Whales, Wow Sorsogon, Watch Our Water World, pwedeng sabihin, marami tayong ginamitan ng Wow. Nung nagpalit, ang problema natin, kailangan meron tayong marka pagka tayo nalagay sa isang lugar. At siguro dahil doon, medyo hiwalay ng landas. Hindi naman masama po yan per se. Pero siyempre, dapat nakafocus ka na kung maayos na, you're a basketball player na very good one at that. When you know something works, yung play na yun, gagalingan nyo pa para lalong gumanda. Hindi yung papalitan mo yung play just because gusto mo magbago. You cannot change for the sake of change. Change has got to be dedicated, has got to be consistent and sustainable. Yun siguro ang medyo nawala. Yung sabi ko nga kanya, shared vision, shared values, shared sacrifices, shared triumphs na po. Yun ang aking nakikita.
Meron po ba tayo, Mr. President, na masamang ugali na tuwing may magandang nangyayari sa isang organisasyon, sa isang sangay ng pamahalaan at mayroong papalit, and just because this particular individual na na-appoint o napunta sa isang posisyon would like to make a mark and would like to differentiate himself, considering na may magandang nangyayari, hindi po ito itutuloy.
Well, I'm sure gusto nilang tumuloy, pero siyempre, dapat pag-aralan. We have to learn to analyze what works and what does not work. Hindi yung porque nakaupo ka, gusto mo baguhin kagad, kailangan talaga, ano ba nag-work? Di ba, pagka kayo nag-play, ano ba nag-work? Maganda yung screen. Maganda yung play na yon. So, gagalingan nyo pa, hanap ka ng ibang alternative na mapapasahan para hindi mababantayan. Yun ang kulang siguro. At saka siyempre hindi natin maalis yan. By the way, that is not only happening in the Philippines. It happens everywhere. Yung nga lang, those who replace, they want to have their mark, but they make things sustainable. Ginagawa nila yung tama. Kumbaga ko taking the good, throw out the bad. But don't throw the baby with the bath. Importante yan. Dahil kundi, walang mangyayari. By the way, Mr. President, I just want to let everybody know here. Wala na ako sa Subic dahil sa trabaho ng mga volunteer. Tayo po ngayon ay fourth biggest shipbuilder in the world. Bakit po? Nung ginagawa po yung airport, pumunta po ako doon at pinamadali ko, kalahati by FF Cruz. Dahil nagmamadali po tayo. Kalahati by Hanjin. It was their first time to build an airport. Biniding po yan kasama namin ng World Bank. Makuha ng Hanjin, nagulat sila. Pero pag pupunta ako doon, pag nagkalat yung sigarilyo, pinapupulot ko, sasabihin sa kanila, what are you building here? Oh, we're building an airport. No. Magsasagot tayo sa mga empleyado, pati mga Koreano. Sabi ko, what are you building here? Well, we're doing an airport. No. You're building our country. Apparently, one time, nagpunta doon yung chairman. Alam nyo, nanalo siya doon sa sugal niya na magtayo ng airport sa Pilipinas, sa Subic. And later on, he would become chairman of the whole Hanjin Corporation. And when he thought of a shipyard that would be placed in Asia, walang kaduda-duda sa kanya, sa Subic. And I cannot forget this because hindi ako naimbitahan sa Malacanang nung inaugurahan yung Hanjin. Nagtatampo sa akin ng presidente noon. Pero alam niyo ang ginawa ng chairman na yan? Tinawag po tayo sa Manila Hotel, pa-dinner siya, at sabi niya, kaya tayo lumipat dito because of the hard work of the people under this man who made me believe in the Philippines. I can never forget that story.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I have a story of my own with Subic Industries, particularly Hanjin. During my time in TESDA, I remember we were looking for 5,000 welders every single year for the shipyard in Subic. Mr. President, it's more than about, 25 years since you were the chair of SBMA. May I know what had happened, what changes took place, and perhaps we talk about industries, for instance, how many industries were there during your time, and perhaps we talk about employment, because I remember during my stint, this representation stint as the Director General of TESDA, I didn't go to any officials of SBMA. Not that I am not invited or brief of what's going on in SBMA, but because I thought it would be a great idea for TESDA to have a memorandum of agreements and partnership with the different industries like Acer, Hanjin, and the likes. So again, I just wanted to ask Mr. President, how do you compare SBMA during your time and this time? And perhaps if you can give us a bird's eye view of how are we going to move forward in ensuring that what you have started in SBMA will not go to waste.
Well, there were 5 F's in my vocabulary that I coined during my time in Subic. I was learning as I was doing it. 5 F's. Focus. Nakafocus ka, makakuha ka ng trabaho sa tao. Fast. Mabilis kang magpapasok ng negosyo. Walang delay para mabilis silang papasok. Friendly. Walang kurakot. Flexible. Pagka hindi magawa, hindi ka talagang parang may blinders. Pwede bang ayusin. And finally, forward-looking. Ina-adjust mo. Lalagay ka ng airport, lalagay ka ng communications, like yung 5ESS switch, nung araw, sikat na sikat yan. Yung fiber optic cable, lalagay naman natin yan. May satellite communications. Lahat yun nilagay natin. So, naging kaakit-akit. Pumasok ang Acer. Later on, sabi ni kaibigan ngayon yung may-ari yung founder niyan eh. Sabi niya, we will make this the biggest Acer company. Nung nawala na tayo, hindi na Acer ngayon. Ang pangalan ngayon, Wistrom na. Imbis na gumagawa ng computer at laptops, hindi na gumagawa nun. Iwan pa sa motherboard card, hindi na ganun karami ang trabaho. You can see the factory there. We had also a lot of Taiwanese firms that came in, gumagawa ng kwan. Yung Omron sa Hapon, gumagawa ng mga locks, yung mga turnstiles, ginagawa yan dyan. Reebok for a while, pero nawala yan because, alam mo, ang laking story yan ng Reebok because nalugi sila doon sa ibang kumpanya nila, nung magpipick up sila, ayaw na magbayad ng sweldo. Kinuha ko lahat yung equipment nila hanggang bayaran nila yung sweldo. Maraming experience dyan. Koreans were making fishing poles. Another Japanese company was making telephones and kung ano, maraming ginagawa. You had hotels coming in, you had a casino from Genting Highlands, and you had other companies that were putting up support for FedEx. Hitachi was building refrigerators and air conditioners. Ang dami talaga. Pero nung napasok, nagbawas na nagbawas. So, kaya, I'm sorry to say this, but sometimes I'd rather not go. I go there at most once a month because pag nakikita ko, nasasaktan lang ako eh. Kaya nga, inlabas ko na ito sa mga loob ko ngayong araw na ito para maraman nyo na we cannot go by missed opportunities.
Mr. President, if I may, can we talk about employment and the importance of having a decent and kanina binabanggit nyo nga po, hindi yung endotype or hindi yung palliative solution type of employment. And I remember when I had the chance to partner with different industries in Subic Bay, and I think you mentioned a while ago, Coach Bags, Luwentai, we were able to produce some 8,000 sewers for Ralph Lauren, for Muji, etc.
Suits.
Yes. Mr. President, may I know from the distinguished gentleman the magnitude of creation of employment when you talk about the Subic Bay Metropolitan Authority?
Yes, sir. We had 200,000 jobs in and out of the facility. Remember, patay ang Olongo po. Patay yung Subic.
And I remember a lot of my kababayans from Bulacan would go to Subic for work.
Yes. And because nagkaroon ng hanap buhay, nagkaroon ng multiplier effect yan, lumakas ulit yung palengke, yung mga bigas sa Nueva Ecija, nabebenta ulit dyan. But more than that, kung titingnan nyo ang Taiwan, ang Korea, nagsimula yan doon sa mga Reebok.
Yes.
Ganon-ganon lang yan.
You
Hanggang-
even brought the Reebok shoes of Shaquille O'Neal
That's right, you
during
remember
my
that,
college days, Mr. President.
That's correct. Ang laki yata, size 18 ata yun, or size 19?
20 something.
Ang laki nun.
22, size 22, if I'm
And
not
I can tell you,
mistaken.
Mr. President, yun ang pinafollow ko. I remember the Deputy Minister of Trade of Taiwan came over. Sabi niya, hindi namin kayo makalimutan. Ang Pilipinas doon, sikat na sikat. Gustong-gusto namin pumunta dyan. Yung Bank of, nga ba yun, si Jeffrey Koo. May bangko dito yun. Kalimutan ko yung pangalan ngayon. Sabi niya, you know, Mr. Chairman, sabi niya, nung papunta kami dyan, pati paa namin. Pinipingerprint. He was a golfer. Dahil natatakot tayo nung pumapasok ang mga Taiwanese at tumatakas sa People's Republic of China, pumapasok dito. And yet, sabi nung Minister of Trade, yung Deputy Minister, sabi niya, before, wala kaming sapatos. Ang sapatos namin, isa. Ngayon, ang mga anak namin, namimili ng Reebok, Nike, lahat. Because yumaman na kami. Alam namin ang pakiramdam nyo. Sana umabot rin kayo sa amin. Ang sakit noon. Several times, nahiwa yung puso ko dyan. Mahathir one there, sabi niya sa akin, no? Chairman, sabi niya gano'n, I know how it is to be poor. We used to be poor like you. Gusto ko na sagutin eh. Because we were better than they were.
Yes.
And yet, lumakas sila. So, ano ang feel? Eventually, kukuha ka ng mga kumpanya na padikit-dikit sa sapatos, gagawa ng Amerikana. Nung araw, sinusuit ko pa yung Amerikana. You remember, I would wear the suit. I get a Reebok pair of shoes or yung telephone na ginagawa o yung mga fishing pole, lahat. Yung mga dive suit, ginagawa doon yan. Yung mga locks, yung mga kwan. And sabi ko, someday, nagsisimula ka. I remember I would go to Reebok. Bubulungan ko yung babae. Napaka-boring. Alas 3 na madaling araw, batang babae, dumadaan yung sapatos, kinokola yung sapatos. Sabi ko, nag-aaral ka ba? Tingin, tatakot pa, baka makagalitan. Hindi, kausapin mo ako. Hindi mo makapag-aral sa trabaho. Sabi ko, hindi, pilitin mo mag-aral. Sabi ko, anong ambisyon mo sa buhay? Hanggang dito na lang po. Hindi, ako, tingnan mo. Nakita mo yung inchik na yun? Sabi ko, gano'n. Gusto ko by next year, kunin mo yung trabaho nun. Galingan mo. And then, you know, some of them really followed the advice. And pretty soon, they were managers. And that's how you go development. Development starts when you leave something that is less and you go for something more. Tataas yan ang tataas yan. Kung napagbigyan, siguro marami na. Ang FedEx, nung araw, pag tumanggap, ang laki ng sweldo. Pero 900 lang ang nakuha nila. Pero hanggang sa Maynila, meron silang operation. I remember I go to Davao, kakabit ko yung FedEx doon sa cut flowers ng Davao at saka tuna ng Davao because dinadala yung tuna overnight sa Japan. Kaya fresh tuna, dalagay sa FedEx, doon pa kay Bert Lina, doon sa Air Freight 2100, sasakay, dadalay Subic, kakarga. The next afternoon, afternoon after they fly early in the morning, nandun na sa Japan. So, marami tayong dapat maintindihan. Speed is the name of the game. Ito ang do, katulad ngayon, interview ka sa radyo, mapuputol yung telepono. Bakit? Overloaded. Ba't natin pinababayaan na ganyan? Dapat lahat meron. Yung internet, masaya na tayo, naglagay na internet. No! Dapat ang internet ang susi. Yan ang mga barko, yan ang mga aeroplano ng mga mahihirap para makita nila hindi nila ma-afford by way of the internet. Yan sila nakakakuha ng knowledge. But we are not making it fast enough. Marami tayong pwedeng gawin, and that's why every time you have in Iloilo, Cagayan de Oro, a Negros, or a Cebu, or Batangas, or Laguna going up, let us keep on supporting these areas para lumakas tayo, because that's the only way. The hard way is always the best way.
I agree, Mr. President. And yung binanggit niyo ho kanina, 200,000 jobs. Sa inyo po bang pananaw sa mga panahon na ito, meron po ba kayong ini-envision na figure na kung saan Subic is supposed to be creating this much jobs? Mr. President, I have to also commend Subic during that time, especially during your time, when you talk about jobs being created in the tourism sector. When you go to Subic, during my college days, you could hardly go there without reservations in the
correct.
hotel.
That's correct.
It's all fully booked.
That's correct.
Again, Mr. President, my take here is that it is important that we focus on creating decent jobs. It is important that we look back and see how Subic became the darling, not only of this country, but of Southeast Asia. And how can we actually go back to that position, Mr. President, if the distinguished gentleman would talk about nawawalang mga gamit sa Subic. If you look up the infrastructure projects, Mr. President, I just saw Senator Manny Pacquiao during the hearing of his committee, naslashan pa yung budget ng infra sa Region 3 ng about 3 or 4 billion pesos. So again, Mr. President, it's important, I think, that we really discuss these issues concerning job creation.
And I thank the gentleman because these are very prescient and very, penetrating questions. Because minsan nakala natin, nangyari lang dahil madali. I remember I would make slogans. I'm a cheerleader. I'm not like you. I mean, I'm not a very good player, so I always cheered for our team in the same manner that I think we should cheer for our country all the time. So I would say, Mayo Longo po, mag-ambisyon ka. Bawal ang tamad, work ethic, lalong bawal ang tanga, mag-aaral ka. Duty, dignity, determination. When I took over Subic, I said, protect and preserve to prosper. Protect Subic, let's not steal it. Protect and preserve yung forest at saka yung mga iniwan ng Amerikano. That will protecting and preserving our reputation and we will prosper. And then sumunod doon, preparation, hard work, opportunity. Maganda ka, hindi ka kakausapin ng Hapon ng Tagalog. Mag-aaral ka mag-English. Manood ka ng English and then think in English. Tinuturo ko yan hanggang doon. Think in English. Para hindi yung, hello, police, this is, accident there is, coming you, waiting I. Di ba? Hello, police ba ito? May aksidente dito.
How are you dito na me?
Punta ka rito, hintayin kita rito. Ganun eh. Hindi pwedeng ganun. So, you have to think in English. And I would remind them, read. Pagkatapos, sabihin ko sa kanila, preparation, hard work, opportunity. Magsipag ka, mag-ambisyon ka, kunin mo yung trabaho ng boss mo. And then the other thing that I want to say is this. You copy from other countries. Japan copied from other countries. Hindi marunong mag-English sa mga yan, pero they copied their army from Germany, their navy from Britain. They made Leica, Nikon. They made Ford. Yung Ford nila, naging Toyota. Nagawa lahat yan. But, ang sinasabi ko dito ito, ako nung araw, Hong Kong. Nagsimula ang Hong Kong, Opium War. Kinuha ng British yung Hong Kong. Later on, kinuha ng Freeport. Pwede lahat, kahit ano. And then, they went to Kowloon. Nagkaroon ng ferry. Kumita sila sa ferry. Balik-balik at sa Bante. Di ba? Tapos, nagpunta ngayon sa new territories. Lumalabas na. Tapos, nagpunta sa Shenzhen, sa Macau. Nagkaroon ng airport ang Macau, Shenzhen, hanggang umabot na sa buong China. Ang plano namin sa Subic, and I want you to all to know this, is yung 143, from one highway, one railroad, you go to 4 airports, and 4 seaports and 3 airports. From Olongapo, you go to Bataan, you go to Zambales, you go to Clark or you have Pampanga, you go to Tarlac, you go to Nueva Ecija, you go to Bulacan, pakalat yan. Decongest Manila, disperse industries. Yung ginawa na iglesia, lagyan natin. Ayala, lagyan natin. In fact, we give incentives para pumunta rin yan, para lumuwag ang Maynila. Where you work, you live. Where you work, you go to school. Hindi ka tulad ngayon, madaling araw, aalisin ka Bulacan, at kung magkamisan, iiwanan ng anak, mag-aaral mag-isa, babalik madaling araw na napakamahal ang mamasahe. That is what you call bringing opportunity to our people. Hindi yung naghihintay lang tayong bumagsak ang manna from heaven. Hindi nangyari yan. Yan ang plano namin ng araw. But, hindi pa ako nag-give up. I never give up. we're just beginning to fight again.
Thank you, Mr. President. And again, it would be interesting to note that the Bible says people perish for lack of vision.
That's correct.
And that's why visionary leaders are needed in our country today. For my last point, Mr. President, it was mentioned a while ago about the appointment of a certain
Martin Dino.
Martin Dino, and I have this representation of nothing against him. It's just that, Mr. President, I feel that there's so many positions in government that we need to double check, because not all of them would go through the Commission on Appointments. And I think one position like SBMA, Clark, AFAB, the Freeport area of Bataan,
The airports,
and some other positions, Mr.
Cebu
President.
International,
And-
Manila International.
And this is something that I wanted to raise with the distinguished gentleman from Olongapo, that there's so many positions in the government that we need to perhaps reevaluate with regard to the competencies, the requirements, because these are very important positions na hindi po pwedeng basta kung sino lang ang pwede nating ilagay dito. Merong mga momentum na tinatamasa tayo. For example, nung last privilege speech po natin, binanggit natin yung pagbaba ng unemployment rate, pagbaba ng underemployment rate, significant. Kung magpapatuloy po ang pagbibigay ng posisyon, and I'm not saying, no, dito lang sa SBMA, or I'm not even saying, or singling out yung pong binanggit na pangalan kanina. Ang sinasabi ko lang po, Mr. President, is that perhaps our institution would do something in looking into these very important positions. Because, again, I have heard enough this afternoon about missed opportunities. And opportunities are missed because some people don't care. And I don't want to be part of this group of people who doesn't care. Sapagkat, Mr. President, I believe na meron tayong great destiny as a nation, at itong mga kasamahan po natin, kasama dito sa Senado, ay mayroong magagawa tungkol po dito sa usapin na ito.
Thank you very much. It's very commendable that you make these observations, Mr. President. You have to define yourself. We all have to define ourselves. And you're a human being because you care for your fellow man. And you don't stop. You don't take the position. Because leadership is not position. It is action. You don't stay in place. Right now, ang sitwasyon natin is we're practically running to stay in place. Hirap na hirap tayo.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you po.
President.
Thank you.
Again, I'd like to associate this representation with the gentleman from Olongapo City, and I'd like to put on record that I will actively participate and cooperate with to the leadership of our dear colleague, Senator Dick Gordon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Mr. President, before I move to refer the speech of the gentleman and the succeeding interpellations to a committee, Senator Pacquiao wishes to make a manifestation, not an interpellation.
Senator Pacquiao is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will not going to interpolate, but to manifest that for the record, Mr. President, I would suggest that to have dialogue with between the Senate representative and the President to aid the President in choosing the chairman of SBMA. I think that would be good, and manapagaganda ito para mag-move yung plano natin para ma-actionan lahat ng mga problema dito sa napakalaking tulong sa ating bansa pag ito ay ma-maximize yung facilities. Thank you.
Thank you po. Hindi lang po sa Subic, ngunit yung team doon sa Central Luzon, sa Northern Luzon, sa Southern Luzon. Kailangan yung mga team natin talagang teamwork para yung ilalagay, hindi lang magaling, ngunit talaga may vision at kayang pagalawin ng tao. Because after all, leadership is the ability to make the people move and do what they have to do.
That's why, Mr. President, I would suggest that to have a dialogue with the President to talk about this problem and later on we can it can help a lot.
Thank you, sir.
Forever.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Mr. President.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. President, I move that we refer the privileged speech of the gentleman to the Committee on Accountability of Public Officers and the Committee on Trade
The Committee on Accountability
of Public Officers, because the speech was mentioning the fact that there were many items and many things that are missing already in the Subic.
All right. Any
In the
objection? Hearing none, the privileged speech of Senator Gordon, together with the interpolations, are hereby referred to the Committee on Accountability of Public Officers.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Majority Floor Leader. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. President, earlier, we also had guests of Senator Pacquiao. He has two resolutions with us today, but let me acknowledge the guests of Senator Pacquiao, Mr. Abdurrahman Kanakan, the Chancellor of the Mindanao State University, together the General Santos Campus, together with his wife, Mrs. Laila Kanakan, and Dr. Marlene Abiera, the Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs, and Mrs. Fanny Kumosing, Budget Officer of the Mindanao State University. Also, Miss Emma Cordero, Mrs. Universe 2016, together with the MCOR Voice on an Angel Foundation, Mr. President. I would like to acknowledge their presence and welcome them to the Senate.
We welcome our guests and make their presence of record at
Thank you.
for today's session.
Thank you. Mr. President, I move for the consideration of PS Resolution 165.
Any objection? Hearing none, consideration of the measure is in order.
Maybe ask the Secretary to read the title of the measure without
Secretary will
prejudice
read
to
the title of
inserting
the
into
measure.
records, entire text.
Resolution regulating the use, integration into the records of the Senate and proper archival of film, video clips, multimedia, or similar devices used by any senator to whom the floor has been assigned by the chair in plenary session.
Mr. President, this proposed resolution, which was read into the records about a day or two ago, was the brainchild of the Senate President. The intention, as clearly stipulated in the title, has three main objectives. First, to limit to 30 minutes the showing of videos or similar materials during the delivery of privileged speeches, making motions, arguments, and debates, or every time a senator takes the floor for that matter. The idea behind the proposal is to regulate the use of various technology-based visual aids employed by our colleagues every time they take the floor, with which otherwise are not covered by the rules of the Senate, and make efficient the time of Senate sessions. Second, Mr. President, is to make these visual aids to form part of the records of the Senate. While the slide presentation is being explained by a senator sponsoring the measure, the contents in the slides are not being reflected in the transcript. More so for the video presentation, wherein all the spoken words, narrations, or acts presented in the video clips are not incorporated in our Senate records and will only place in the transcript of the record the phrase, "At this juncture, the video was played." Ayun ang nangyayari sa journal no? So, through this resolution, we can put in place a system by which PowerPoints and video clip presentations can be made accessible at any time, probably through digital means for our respective perusals. And lastly, the proper archiving of the video or multimedia materials at our legislative records and archive service for safekeeping. So unless there are any questions, I would like to proceed and proceed with the period of amendments, because there are some proposed amendments to the resolution, Mr. President.
The Majority Leader can proceed with the period of amendments, as apparently there are no questions from the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. some minor amendments on the measure. On the fourth whereas clause, delete the entire paragraph and replace it with the following. Whereas the aforesaid video clips, multimedia, or other similar devices used during a speech, comma, motion or question shall be sent to and made accessible at any time at the Legislative and Archives Service. I move for the adoption, Mr. President.
Any
For the
objection?
amendment.
Hearing none.
Next, Mr. President, on the fifth paragraph or the first resolutory clause, the third line, between the words per and speech, delete the word privilege.
Any objection? Hearing none. Adopted.
On the same paragraph and line, after the word speech, insert a punctuation, comma, and the words motion or question.
Any objection? Hearing none.
On the last paragraph, delete the entire paragraph and replace it with the following. Resolved further that the contents of all films, video clips, multimedia, or other similar devices shown or played before the plenary shall be summarized and integrated into the records of the Senate before said devices are sent to the Legislative Records and Archives Service for safekeeping. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? On the editorial amendment, maybe we say resolve finally instead of resolve further.
Accepted, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none.
Thank you. Mr. President, there are no other amendments. I move to close the period of amendment.
So closed.
I move to adopt PS Resolution 165 as amended, subject to style, Mr. President.
There's a motion that proposed Senate Resolution number 165 be adopted. Is there, as amended, any objection? Hearing none. Approved.
Thank you. Mr. President, last Monday, after Senator Antonio Trillanes IV delivered his speech on a point of public interest, he immediately proceeded to move for the referral of his speech to the Committee on Accountability of Public Officers Investigations, so that, as he suggested, an inquiry be conducted to look into the alleged direct involvement of then Mayor, now President Duterte, etc., etc. Now, the parliamentary status of the motion is that the body decided to refer the subject speech to the Committee on Rules for further study and review. Now, Mr. President, your Committee on Rules, and I have consulted the other members, even Senator De Lima, Senator Lacson, others who are not even members of the Rules Committee, and the members of the Rules Committee. We have decided to refer the subject speech to the Committee on Justice and Human Rights. The speech was mainly focused, although not solely, on the establishment of the reliability and truthfulness of the testimonies made by witness Mr. Edgar Matubato during the extrajudicial killings and Davao Death Squad hearing of the Committee on Justice and Human Rights. That was last September 22. So while we respect the right of any senator to take the floor and propound on an issue of grave national concern, such as what Senator Trillanes did, the committee believes that the plenary is not the right forum to raise the issues delivered last Monday, but instead in the ongoing series of committee hearings in the Justice Committee from which the proponents' negating statements originated. So, without belaboring the point, Mr. President, may I then move that the said privilege speech be referred to the Committee on Justice and Human Rights as primary referral and secondarily to the Committee on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs, Mr. President.
The Rules Committee, chaired by the Majority Leader, has ruled that the matter of the privileged speech and the interpretations thereon should be properly referred to the Committee on Justice which has jurisdiction over the issue presented in terms of the credibility of the testimony given by the witness. And therefore, the appropriate motion has been put on the floor, referring the matter to the Committee on Justice and secondarily to the Committee on
Public order.
Public Order. Any objection? Hearing none.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the consent of the chamber, I move for the consideration of Senate Resolution 166.
A motion for the reconsideration
Consideration.
of proposed Senate Resolution 166. Any objection? Hearing none. Approved.
Maybe ask Secretary to read the title of the measure without prejudice to inserting to the records the text.
A resolution commending and congratulating Donnie Nietes, Mark Magsayo, and Arthur Villanueva for winning in the Pinoy Pride 38 held on September 25, 2016 at the StubHub Center in Carson, California.
Mr. President, Senator Manny Pacquiao has requested to submit his sponsorship, insert into the records his sponsorship speech for the resolution. So move that we accept.
The chair has no objection to the motion of the majority leader, but as we recall, in the past Congress, the majority leader has imposed the rule that whoever would want a resolution to be sponsored on the floor, at the very least, the
Should be
author
present.
must be present.
Yes, thank you for reminding me, Mr. President. Senator Pacquiao was here a while ago. Maybe ask Sergeant at Arms if Senator Pacquiao is still in the building or is still here. If he's not in the plenary hall and he's not in the lounge, I withdraw my motion, Mr. President.
Motion is withdrawn.
Thank you, Mr. President. Pursuant to Section 20, Republic Act 9520, or the Philippine Cooperative Code, Section 45 of Republic Act 9502, or the Universally Accessible, Cheaper, and Quality Medicines Act, I'd like to manifest the following members for the Senate to the Joint Congressional Oversight Committee on Cooperatives. These are for the majority, Senator Juan Miguel Zubiri, Chairman, Senators Hontiveros, Gordon, and Villanueva, members, and Senator Escudero for the minority, Mr. President. So moved.
Any objection? Hearing none. Carried.
Also, for the Congressional Oversight Committee on Quality Affordable Medicines, Mr. President, I move that we elect Senator Juan Miguel Zubiri, Chairman, members Senators Hontiveros, Gatchalian, Aquino IV, and for the minority, Senator Trillanes IV.
Any objection? Hearing none. Approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. And finally, pursuant to Section 91 of Republic Act 9497, otherwise known as the Civil Aviation Authority Act, the following members of the Senate, I move that we we manifest the members, Congressional Oversight Committee on Civil Aviation Authority of the Philippines, for the majority, Senators Grace Poe as Chairman, Senators Soto, Aquino IV, and Lacson as members, and for the minority, Senator Escudero. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? None.
Mr. President, I move that we adjourn the session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Monday, October 3, 2016.
Session is adjourned until October 3, 3 o'clock in the afternoon.